Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we got a couple of things to discuss, including a couple of signings by Seattle Kraken, some more PTO updates, and some trade and signing rumors involving the Calgary Flames, Pittsburgh Penguins, Edmonton Oilers, LA Kings, as well as the Vancouver Canucks. I'll get to all that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Now, as usual, I'll kick things off today by discussing a couple of signings that have happened over the past couple of days. The Seattle Kraken have made two signings over the past couple of days. Signing winger Devin Shore to a one-year deal with the AAV of $675,000, and signing defenseman Mitch Reineke to a one-year deal with the AAV of $675,000. Now, first with Devin Shore, he's a winger. He's been playing around the NHL for the past number of seasons as sort of a depth forward. Was drafted in 2012 by the Dallas Stars, where he started his career. Had some of his better years there in 16, 17, 17, 18, put up 30 points. He had a grand total of 2.5 seasons with the Stars. He would have a grand total of 2 half seasons with the Ducks. He had a half season with the Columbus Blue Jackets, and then he spent the past 3 years in the Edmonton Oilers organization. He's been really good as like a good depth forward for the Oilers, not getting into every NHL game, but he's been a good bomb six forward when called upon. But he hasn't played in every game. I mean, he had 9 points in 47 games last year, but he also played in 5 AHL games. So he can be a good bomb six forward, he can be a good spare forward, he can be a good AHL forward, he can be a really good any one of these things. So I think it's really good to see him sign. For the Kraken, they have an extremely deep forward group. I mean, extremely deep, so it'll be extremely hard for him to crack that forward group. If he can make it to a spare, I think it's quite possible he could be a spare. But besides that, he'll most likely start the season, in my opinion, in the AHL, go on waivers, be sent to the minors, and be a good call-up option for the Seattle Kraken if they run into injuries. So, good sign there. It's good to see that Shore was able to get an actual contract and not have to go to camp on a PTO. So, good to see that he gets an actual NHL contract, and hopefully he can make the most of this and help the Kraken out any way they need to this year. And then the Kraken also signed, like I said, Mitch Reineke to a one-year deal with the AAV of $775,000. Reineke, unlike Shore, doesn't have much NHL experience. Actually, he has next to none at all. Reineke played in one game in the 17-18 season for the St. Louis Blues. Since then, he's been an AHL defenseman. This past year, a goal, 26 assists, 27 points in 52 games for the Penguins affiliates in Wilkes-Barre. So, once again, another AHL season for him. He's been a pretty good AHL producer, but in my opinion, he's not going to compete for an NHL roster spot. The Kraken already have a pretty deep defense, and he wouldn't be able to surpass any of the players they have here. But he could be a decent call-up option if they run into a ton of injuries. So, not someone who's going to make the NHL roster before training camp ends, but he is someone who I think could definitely get a shot if there's some injuries. So, going to be interesting to see, but Reineke most likely will be an AHL player, as will Shore. But good to see the Kraken have added some more depth to their team by signing Shore to a 2-way deal and signing Reineke to a 2-way deal. So those are some pretty good signings, and the major signings we have to talk about here today. Going over to the PTO updates now, there have been 7 new updates since we last talked on Tuesday about the PTO. So, first, the Anaheim Ducks have signed bruising forward Zach Kassian to a PTO. The Carolina Hurricanes have signed depth forward Nick Shore to a PTO. The Dallas Stars have signed brother of Jamie Benn, Jordy Benn, to a PTO. The Pittsburgh Penguins have signed 3 players, including Mark Pysyk, Libor Hajek, and Austin Wagner to PTOs. And the Nashville Predators have signed goalie Dylan Wells to a PTO. So, all these guys are pretty good PTO signings. If you look at the Ducks, Kassian, he's a really good bomb six forward. He wasn't able to get himself an NHL contract, so maybe he'll be able to get himself an NHL contract with the Ducks. In my opinion, he's still a good fourth-line forward, good fourth-line checking forward for an NHL team, maybe a 13th, 14th forward, so maybe he's able to get himself an NHL contract with Anaheim, so good to see he's going to camp on a PTO. For the Shore, he's more of a depth forward, so not exactly sure if the Canes do wind up signing him, and if they do, it's quite possible he could go to the AHL. But he's a good depth forward. He can be a good, decent bomb six forward, good spare forward. He could be an AHL call-up if they need him to be. So there's the different options there for the Shore. So I really do like that addition for the Canes going into the camp. Jordy Benn's a decent depth defenseman. We know that we've said that the Stars could look for a bigger upgrade on the defensive end, but they do have some good depth on the blue line with guys like Hanley and Bayreuther, so maybe they are able to add Ben as well to challenge for like a 7th spot on the team. Maybe he can be sent down to the AHL if he gets a new deal, but it's going to be really interesting to see how Ben does, partner with his brother Jamie back in Dallas. Then you also have Pittsburgh signing 3 guys. Austin Wagner, decent bottom 6 forward. I could see him be a decent option that the Penguins get to help them continue with their team. For now, I could probably see him be like a spare forward for the Penguins. The Penguins we've already talked about. They don't have really that much depth on the blue line. So getting a guy like Mark Pysyk or Libor Hajek, who have shown flashes of being really good third-pair defensemen in the past, I think that would be a fantastic addition. They sign one of those 2 guys, they can be their 7th defenseman, and then when they're injuries, they can come into the lineup. So some pretty good PTO updates there for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Nashville Predators, just some goaltending depth. Dylan Wells had a pretty good showing last year in the AHL, so if anything, I think Wells could probably be like the 3rd stringer. Their 3rd stringer right now is Yaroslav Askarov, but they may want him to try and improve in the AHL before he gets some call-up options for the NHL. So I think it's quite possible that if Wells were to sign, it might wind up being as like a 3rd-string goaltender in Nashville. Don't think he's going to be surpassing any of the guys of Lankinen or Saros right now, but I do think it's quite possible that he could do that. So going to be interesting to see, but I definitely like these PTO signings. I think the 3 most likely ones to be signed are Ben in Dallas, Pysyk in Pittsburgh, and Cassian in Anaheim. I think those are probably the most likely ones to be signed. Maybe Hayek in Pittsburgh, but I think those ones are the more likely ones to be signed. So going to be interesting to see. I'd love to hear what you think about the PTOs. Which of these 7 guys do you think will be able to get a new contract out of these PTOs? Will it be Cassian, Shore, Ben, Wells, Pysyk, Hayek, or Wagner? Definitely love to hear your thoughts on which one you think was the best signing over the past couple of days. And then we go over here to the trade and signing updates. So there's definitely been a couple of trade and signing updates over the past couple of days. Definitely going to be interesting to see if some of these go true, but first we're going to start here with the Pittsburgh Penguins and Jake Guentzel. Now Guentzel is entering the final year of his deal. He currently has a $6 million cap hit, so he's doing all right now, but there's a lot of talk that his next deal may be a lot more lucrative, and that the Penguins may start to run into the same trouble that the Leafs are running into with William Nylander. It sounds like Guentzel wants for his next contract and views himself on his next contract, just like William Nylander, at around the $10 million mark. So he values himself at around $10 million. I don't think that's too much of a surprise. He's been an extremely talented forward over the past couple of years. He's been a really good playoff producer. He's hit 40 goals, I think, in his past. I think he's hit multiple times, hit 80 points. He's been a really good winger for Sidney Crosby. So, yeah, definitely. I think with his value to where it is right now, if he has another strong season this year, it could push $9-10 million on a new deal. So it seems like he wants double digits on his next deal. The big question, though, is going to be, will he get it? It sounds like the Penguins want him closer to the $8.5-9 million range, which sounds a lot like the Maple Leafs situation. Leafs want Nylander between $8.5 and $9 million, and Nylander wants above $10 million. So it sounds like that may start to become the sort of same situation. It's purely speculation right now, but that's sort of what it sounds like. So it is going to be interesting to see if Guentzel winds up staying with Pittsburgh after this season, or if he's going to be moved somewhere else. But it sounds like Guentzel currently views himself as a $10 million player, and the Penguins currently view themselves as an $8.5 million player. So it's going to be interesting to see if they can bridge the gap. I think Guentzel's probably a little bit under $10 million, but I would probably say he's probably between like $9.5 and $10 million. He's definitely an extremely talented winger, and if you were to go to free agent market, I would definitely think there may be 1 or 2 teams out there who would give him between 9.75 and maybe just over $10 million. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Penguins can bridge the gap. But he's been a really good player for the Penguins, a solid top 6 contributor, a really good goal scorer. He's done fantastic playing on Crosby's line. So I think the Penguins really do want to try and sign him. It's just going to be the option of making the money work, because they already have big contracts like Carlson, Letang, Crosby, Malkin, Raquel, Rust, so they already have so many big contracts. I think it'd be pretty hard to fit Guentzel in at around $10 million. So it's going to be interesting to see, but it sounds like at this point in time, Guentzel views himself as a $10 million player. Penguins view himself as an $8.5 million player, and it's going to be interesting to see if he's able to extend with the Penguins, and if that will be a lower number, or if the Penguins have to go to that sort of ballpark to try and re-sign him, or if he maybe even test free agency next year. So it's going to be interesting to see, but it sounds like Guentzel views himself as a $10 million player, and that could hurt the Penguins' chances to end up re-signing him. And then we've also got another situation here with the Calgary Flames. There was an article that I saw that Lindholm was talking to a Swedish reporter, and the report after was translated from Swedish said that Lindholm says he's willing to sign with the Calgary Flames, which is something that I think most of us have been speculating, but now it sounds like Lindholm does want to resign. We know that Backlund said that he wants to remain a UFA until after the season to see how the season goes. We know Hanifin said he wants to move back to the U.S. He's not willing to re-sign with the Calgary Flames. We know Tyler Toffoli said it was time to move on. He was traded to the New Jersey Devils. But there hadn't been really that much talk about if Lindholm actually really wanted to be moved. And it sounds like he is willing to stay, but it sounds like a lot of the problem is due to money. It sounds like Lindholm really does want a ton of money on his next deal. He also said in that interview, according to translation, that the Flames and Lindholm do have to agree on a ton of things and have to come to terms on a ton of things. And he said that his agent and the Calgary Flames are going to work to try and figure out a deal, but it's going to be quite interesting to see. So I definitely do expect the Flames to try and continue to work. A couple weeks ago, I think this was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, on an NHL Network appearance, David Pagnotta did say that there was some speculation that he was hearing that the Calgary Flames had a deal on the table for Lindholm that was around the $8.25 million mark. Now, if that is true and it's between like $8.5 million, it's not going to be the best contract for Lindholm, because let's face it, Lindholm I think is a lot more valuable than that. Lindholm's a better forward, goal scorer, point player than Aho is. He has around I think the same career high in points with around just over 80, and Aho just signed a $9.75 million deal. If Lindholm was to go to free agency, there would be teams who would be willing to pay him $10 million. Now, I'm not sure if he wants $10 million, but I think it at least has to start with a 9 if he's going to sign. So I think if that really was the case, and the big offer that the Calgary Flames were trying to get Lindholm to sign was in the 8.5 range, they're probably going to have to step up their offer if they really want to sign Lindholm. So it's most likely going to have to be between probably $9 and $10 million, probably somewhere around there to sign Lindholm. But it does sound like Lindholm is willing to stay and is willing to re-sign with the Calgary Flames, which is good news for Flames fans. So it sounds like, unlike Backlund, who wants to wait until the end of the season, unlike Hanifin, who wants to go back to the U.S., unlike Toffoli, who just don't want to go there, it sounds like Lindholm is willing to stay. But it just sounds like he's asking for something a lot more than the Flames are currently offering right now, and the Flames may have to step up their asking price if they are going to find middle ground there. So going to be interesting to see, but it sounds like Lindholm's willing to stay, and it's just a matter of coming to terms on some sort of a new deal. So going to be interesting to see how that situation plays out over the next couple of weeks. Going over to a couple of trade rumors here. Going over to the Vancouver Canucks, it sounds like Brock Boeser's name might come up before the season starts. According to Ryan Dixon of Sportsnet, he believes we may see Boeser's name pop up one more time during training camp. We know the Canucks need to make some sort of a trade to free up cap space. We know there's been a lot of speculation that Tyler Myers could be traded. It is after September 1st now, so not only are there going to be a lot of trade rumors speculating between a lot of teams to try and free up cap space, make themselves cap compliant. Training camp's only a couple weeks away, but Myers' signing bonus should be paid in the not-too-distant future if it hasn't been already. So if there was a Tyler Myers trade to happen, it may happen in the near future. I'm not saying it's definitely going to, but if there was a Myers trade that teams were waiting for him to sign his bonus, I think there's a likely chance that could be in the near future. So we're going to have to wait and see, but I think definitely there's a possibility Tyler Myers could be moved, but I'm not sure if Myers being moved will be enough, especially if Tanner Pearson is healthy and ready to go. So if Pearson's healthy and ready to go, even a Myers move might not be enough. So they may have to move someone else as well. I think they may have to make 1 or 2 moves to become cap compliant. So it's going to be really interesting to see, but we know Myers is maybe going to be traded, but there could need to be a forward as well. So that's where Boeser comes into the picture. He's a really good forward. He has a couple of years left at $6.65 million. He's really good, really young forward, but he has said that in the past, it sounded like he asked for a trade midway through the season. He didn't get that trade, but then he had a really good showing later towards the season. He really liked the way that the team was going with Rick Tocchet as head coach. And it sounds like over the offseason, he's taken back his trade request and he wants to remain in Vancouver. He keeps on saying that he's going to have a really good season this year. He's going to try and hit 30 goals this year, which I think is fantastic. So I definitely don't think it's a guarantee that Boeser's moved. He's a really good forward, but I also think that he's a really good forward who I think the Canucks could really use. So I think they may try and look to a guy like Connor Garland or Anthony Beauvillier before they try and move a guy like Brock Boeser. So I think that's a possibility. But still, I think it has to be at least a possibility. Boeser's making $6.65 million. If they were able to unload that contract before training camp, it would definitely help them become cap compliant. So I definitely think on top of Myers, there may have to be a forward moved. And it sounds like Boeser's name may start to come up in the trade rumor mill over the next couple of weeks. But I'm not sure that he will be traded. I think it's more likely that forwards Garland or Beauvillier get traded before a guy like Brock Boeser gets traded. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I definitely do expect that to be the case for the Vancouver Canucks. If you look at the Edmonton Oilers, there was a recent article from Alan Mitchell in The Athletic saying that if the Oilers' Jack Campbell doesn't get off to the best start and once again loses the starting role Stuart Skinner, because if you look at last year, Campbell was brought in to be the starting goaltender in Edmonton. He was brought in to be the really good starting goaltender that the Oilers really needed. He was signed to a 5x5 deal, 5 years, $5 million, to be that starter. And really early on, even though his record wasn't too bad, his numbers were atrocious, and that really led to Skinner becoming the starter for the Edmonton Oilers. It was really bad for Campbell, but Skinner really ran with it. Skinner sort of ran out of steam in the playoffs, was pulled multiple times in the Vegas series. So if Skinner can do really well again this year, I think that'd be fantastic for the Oilers. But it sounds like, according to Alan Mitchell, if Campbell has a really rough start and he can't find his footing early on, there's a possibility that the Edmonton Oilers could wind up moving him in season to try and find an upgrade if he's not doing too well in the first couple of games, first couple months, something around there. So it's going to be interesting to see, because Campbell does make $5 million for the next 4 years. It is a bit more long-term of a contract, so it'd be extremely difficult to pull off a trade, but we're going to have to wait and see. Campbell's a really good goaltender. I still think, in my opinion, maybe Edmonton's not the best scenario for him, so maybe the Oilers try and trade him. They would definitely have to try and sweeten the package. I do wonder if maybe moving Campbell would give them an opportunity to improve. I still look at teams like maybe Hellebuck and Winnipeg. We know that the Jets really want a good goaltender to continue to run with. Maybe if Campbell's off to Winnipeg, the Jets retain some salary on Hellebuck. Maybe there's a trade to be had between those two teams that sends Campbell to the Jets and Hellebuck to there. That will help the Oilers' goaltending situation for at least this upcoming season. Maybe that's a possibility if Campbell isn't doing too well. I think if the Oilers could definitely have it, I think they would love for Campbell to be a good starter this year and have a good tandem with Skinner and Campbell, but that's possibly not the case. So it's going to be interesting to see, but I definitely think that Campbell and Skinner are going to be extremely important to this team this upcoming season. I think this team needs both of those goalies to be really good, and I think if Campbell does wind up getting off to a sour start in the first 5-10 games in the first couple months of the season, there's a likely chance that he could get moved, and the Oilers could look to a team like maybe Gibson and Anaheim or Winnipeg and Connor Hellebuck to try and improve that goaltending situation, as it might need to be improved if Campbell's not doing too well. So going to be interesting to see, but it sounds like if Campbell continues his streaky play at the start of the season, he may be on the trade block for the Oilers, and the Oilers may try and look for an upgrade with guys like Hellebuck or Gibson in the net to try and help this team, which at this point in time looks like it's cup or bust for the Edmonton Oilers. And lastly here, going over to the LA Kings, I've seen a couple of rumors saying that same sort of thing like the Edmonton Oilers. If the LA Kings goaltending is not really holding its own towards the middle of the season, they may look to try and get some external help by trying to acquire a bigger time addition. Now, we know that they signed Talbot this year, they signed Riddick, they still have Copley, they have a pretty good 3 goaltending system there, but they didn't get that big upgrade. We know going into the offseason, there was a lot of speculation that LA has a good offense, a pretty good defense. That one thing they were missing last year was that star goaltender to try and save their behind in the playoffs, and they didn't really do that. They ran out of cap space by signing the Dubois deal, so they really ran out of cap space, so they signed Talbot to a cheap $1 million deal, and that really saved them for this upcoming season. Now, Talbot has injury history. I think he's a good goaltender. He was a little bit streaky last year. He had injuries last year. Ottawa wasn't the best defensive team, so yeah, I think Talbot having a down year last year is reasonable. In Minnesota, he was a pretty good goaltender. Back a couple of years ago in Edmonton, he was a pretty good goaltender. So yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of options there for the LA Kings to have a good season from Cam Talbot. I also think there's a really good possibility that Copley is a really good goaltender this year. He showed last year he could be a decent starter. He really did save the LA Kings season last year. So if Copley continues his play, it's fantastic. And Rittich is a decent backup when called upon. But the question is, can all these things happen? Can Talbot stay healthy? And can Talbot play really well? Can Copley replicate his production from last year? Or is he going to play a little bit worse than he did during this great stretches from last year? Is Rittich going to have to come into the lineup? I think there's a lot of questions for the Kings goaltending. I'm not saying it's bad. I think they can be a decent tandem, sort of like a Hill and Brossoit from last year in the playoffs. But I definitely think there is some problems there. And if Talbot starts to get injured early on in the season, or if Copley isn't playing to the level he was this past year, I think there's a lot of options there for the Kings to possibly make a move. A lot of people have been linking them to Hellebuyck. If they start out sour, maybe the Jets retain half of his salary. Hellebuyck at $3 million is a lot more palatable than Hellebuyck at like $6 million. Then maybe they move a couple of contracts the other way, make the cap work. And I think the Kings could definitely pull off a Hellebuyck trade. So it's going to be interesting to see. I definitely do expect maybe them to go after Hellebuyck. I could also see a guy like John Gibson be of interest to them. I know they're rivals with the Anaheim Ducks. I'm not sure if that's a trade that would work. But Gibson signed for a couple more seasons. He could really be a solid starting goaltender, not only for this year, but for the next couple of years. I do wonder if if they're having goaltending troubles, Talbot, Copley aren't doing fantastic. Maybe they circle back to Saros. There was a lot of talk that around the trade line last year, the Kings were interested in Saros. They weren't able to pull off a deal, but as Nashville didn't really want to move him. But Saros, at this point in season, he'll only have a year and a half left on his deal. If the Preds feel that they can't really re-sign him, they still have a really good goalie in Askarov. I think there's a possibility they could try and move him as well. The big thing for the Kings, though, is they have a ton of prospects. They have good defensive prospects, a ton of forward prospects, including center prospects like Madden, Thomas, Turcotte. They even have a couple of good goaltending prospects like Eric Portillo. So I think this Kings team is stacked with prospects. They have a couple of pretty decent picks. So in my opinion, the Kings have the assets to pull off a trade to improve in their net. I think it's really likely that they could improve in their net. So it's going to be interesting to see, but if the Kings are not doing overly well to start because of their goaltending, Talbot's either not doing too well or starting to become injured again, Copley's not having the fantastic effect he had last year, it's quite possible the Kings could try and go out on the trade market, improve their goaltending, and I think guys like Hellebuyck, Gibson, and maybe even Saros are possible options there for the Kings to try and improve their team. So, going to be interesting to see. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all that was discussed today down in the comments. What do you think of the signings, the PTO updates? Do you think Guentzel's going to get $10 million if he hits the open market? Or do you think the Penguins are going to be able to sign him for less? Will Lindholm be able to sign with the Calgary Flames? Or will he go to free agent market next year? And if he does go to free agent market, does that mean that he's going to be traded at some point this season by the Flames? Do the Canucks wind up moving Brock Boeser, or is that more just speculation here and they're most likely going to move someone else like a Myers or a Garland? Do the Edmonton Oilers look to move Campbell in season? I think it's possible, but it's a little bit of a long-term contract, so it may be a little bit more difficult. But I think it's possible that if Campbell has a sour start, the Oilers look for an upgraded net. Do the Kings possibly look for an upgraded net? Guys like Talbot and Copley don't start out too well. I think it's quite possible. I think they were supposed to level up their goaltending this year. They really didn't. And I think if they can get a guy like Hellebuyck or a guy like Gibson or a guy like Saros, if it's possible, I think they would definitely do it. So, going to be interesting to see. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you really like to, remember to subscribe down below. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so definitely check that out. I've linked down in the description below, and I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.